go. Is this thing on? Morning, everybody. My name is John Stauffacher. This is, third year now that I'm here at Circle City, so thank you all for showing up once again. Today we're going to go through and talk about when your people kind of put stuff places where they shouldn't and what we're going to do about it. What we're seeing in enterprises today is that we have a lot of responsibilities to work in a very quick environment, collaborate with a lot of people. A lot of times we don't have the resources we need, so we go to find out what's out there and use the next up-and-coming hot thing. Unfortunately, what that usually lends to is a lot of public services that we utilize to share information that we probably wouldn't want to share with the world. But it's great because our developers can use it, and they know how to use it, and they have tools that integrate with it, and it all makes sense to them, except when you realize that anybody who has a good Google head can figure out where your stuff is and what they can do with it. Back up. Put my contact info on the wrong slide, but there it is if you need it. Up here was one thing that we found just after about 2.5 seconds of searching through GitHub. I ran across this. If you can't see up there behind, we have a consumer key and consumer secret for no auth transaction that was just posted up by somebody, meaning well. They were just doing their job, putting it up there. They didn't realize that they needed to scrub that out. From an attacker standpoint, this is a very low-level, very silent attack that basically they can run through these sites, and I'll get to that part in a bit. But pull as much information as they can from your organization, build up that dossier, build up a profile, a mapping of everything you're running. If they can find credentials like this, far be it. But it goes beyond that. It's building up what services you're running, what your developers write in, who they communicate with, who are they friends with, who are they linked to. A lot of these sites, especially GitHub, is almost a social network in itself. So now you're building on top of your OS that you've already done on the organization, and you're digging through what their developers are starting to share with the world. So we had to admin. Let's read this. We have our users using third-party public services to post stuff that probably is sensitive. They really shouldn't be doing this. And everything there ranges from boring college homework down to that super secret project that we weren't supposed to tell anybody about. The trick for us is how do you weed through all that? How do I weed through the craft and get to what I really want to see? Because there are some fun stuff out there. We know that sites are usually indexed pretty well. Google does a lot of that for us, but even the sites themselves have their own search engines. At the end of this talk, I have somebody's already gone out there and done the deed for us and created a nice aggregator that searches all of them at once. So you don't have to spend a lot of time doing it yourself. So now that they're completely searchable, what can we find? In this one, we actually have a person who has now exposed an internal host name, an internal site for this company right here that no one would have known existed had they not done that. If you were an attacker trying to target that organization, you now have a place to jump off of. Unfortunately, in this case, this company likes to put a lot of their internal stuff on their public DNS, so you can see all of what's going on inside. You can just never connect to it. But the amount of credentials that we find are just really fascinating. From the test I was running and the simple scans I did, almost every company I came across had something like this sitting there, where a developer, just being themselves, copied and pasted what they thought was the perfect, hey, this didn't work, check it out, I need some help. Mostly in gist, not much in GitHub, but mostly in gist. And if you can see here, the authorization, I actually commented out the base64 password. I didn't want to leave it up there. This is dangerous. It's well-meaning. They're not being malicious. They're not, giving this out because they think it's bad. They just don't understand that what they just copied and pasted and put up there is free for everybody to see. A lot of the tools they think they're using are just located to them and your own organization, but they're not. They're on third-party service that's open to everybody. Most of the time, we're not taking precautions to lock down our privacy settings where we're the only ones who can see it. Here we have a full Cisco config, just sitting there. That's the one put up. Just wanted to share with somebody else, wanted to give it to them, say, hey, can you look it over? Is it right? Unfortunately, we have our password sitting right in there. And usually you have networking information. I mean, this isn't random. This isn't like one-offs. I mean, these are prevalent through it. And it's happening more and more each day. It's not like over the years it's gotten less and less. It's actually gotten more and more as people think that they've adopted this way of working, that it's okay to do this because no one has told them not to. And good point. So the man pointed out that the first reaction they have is who's going to find this. At the end of this presentation, I can walk through how we're going to be the ones who will find it, and so you can point out that picture, make it really easy for people to see. This isn't just something buried in the back of some web server somewhere. You've got issues. If someone was going after your company, this is where they start, and you can't see it. You don't see that coming because it's nothing that you guys own. You've now given it to another third party that's basically just putting it out there and saying, hey, it's here, come get it. What about OAuth 2? This one actually did pull out the username and password. That long string there, it equates to that username, that password. It's since been pulled down. But if you notice where that endpoint is, that's a PayPal customer. So this is how you make your money, or ostensibly get money taken out of your account. You've now just posted this up to a public forum and kept in your authorization details. Let that sink in for a minute. I chose this one here because this is the perfect example of, again, they weren't doing any malice. This is like, hey, this thing's not working. Here's the error message I get. Can you go look at it and fix it? And a lot of times they don't. They think, well, it's encrypted, right? And then you have to have the conversation about base64 encoding versus encryption. How about yet to be released products? So I have some pictures on this one. There was a company that had a product that wasn't out yet. It wasn't slated to come out for a while. It was still in R&D. And in that time, that company got purchased by one company and then sold to another. And so all this was floating around. And one day I came across their whole firmware build system for this yet to be released product, which is kind of interesting. I mean, yeah, it's a lot of directories and stuff. That doesn't seem like much. Go back and look at it. This was the marketing interface for it. So this was what they were going to be putting out to the public to manage this product they're going to put out, and the cloud interface behind it and all their pricing. In these directories was all their pricing information, all their connectors back to their gateways. Everything was sitting here before it was released. So it was just sitting out there where anybody can see it. As they were working on it in their teams, because my guess is that they had a team of people who were spread across the globe using this as their main source code repository. Next one we'll go into. Support forums. How many here are members of support forums? All right. How many of you have ever done like a show tack or taken some giant archive of technical data to send over to support people? Nobody? Well, it's yeah, all right. You have? All right. In this case, we had a situation where a admin had taken one of these giant support archives, bundled it up, and posted it right to the forum, and said, "Hey, I'm having this issue. Take a look at it." Inside this archive was everything, the Keysters Kingdom, man. I mean, you had passwords, you had IP addresses, the whole way, the way everything was set up, the application, everything they're running. The software vendor who ran the site didn't verify anyone who joined it, so you could literally just sign up and join the support site. And obviously, your attackers are doing the same thing. They've got accounts with Oracle, they've got accounts with HP. They sit on the forums, they watch. That's what I would do, right? I mean, it just makes sense. So now you have a situation where this guy just uploaded all the keys of the kingdom, and you have to go back and tell him, hey, you might want to pull that back down. You probably want to find another way to get that information over to support, because these forums aren't locked down. It's not like you're the only one who's going to see it. There's a private conversation between you and support. In most cases, these are no better than public forums, other than that general populace just doesn't join it. But it's not like these companies are doing much to verify that you are anything more than their customer. So after we notified them, the archive was pulled down. IoT company. They're coming out with a product. This one's related to the other one. Coming out with a whole new product set. We found that they had posted up their build information, or their build set. So we're looking through here. It's kind of normal, but crockpot emulator. I've always wanted a crockpot emulator. It actually was true. That was part of the products they had. And they also came with complete documentation. They even gave me Visios and all their notes, their schedules. In one of these slides I have, they gave me a list of email addresses to people who are on the project in case I need help setting it up. Oh, and here is where we get the ability to push firmware updates. Now, this was sitting out there for anyone to see. What I didn't realize till later on after I talked with them, we got this all closed down, is that within these libraries, I actually for a while had the ability to push firmware out to every device out there. Didn't happen because I didn't go that deep, but this was just sitting randomly in a spot where everybody could get to it, and you had basically the equivalent of all their work that they'd done up to that point on this project, and the ability to help them out if you needed to. So how can we get a handle on this? Aside from educating our users, aside from doing everything we do to beat them over the head and tell them not to do this anymore, how do we fix this problem? How do we, and still allow them to do their work? Because that's really what we're fighting against. These services, GitHub, Pastebin, the rest of them, they're being used because people feel the need that they have to work at such a speed, but they can't do it with whatever they have in front of them. They're getting blocked by something inside. So what do we do? How do we fix this? We could tell them, no, don't do it. But as the gentleman already pointed out, that doesn't work. That doesn't help. So we've literally got to do what the bad guys do. We've got to be that person that sits around and searches for these things. We have to search our own organization throughout all these sites and make sure we're finding it before the bad guys do, and then doing something with it. Whether it's we issue DMCA takedowns, we have the site owners pull it down, but getting in front of that before it sits there for a year, 2, 3 years, and we're stuck not knowing that we'd had our credentials sitting out there for years. But what do we want to look at? SSH keys are a pretty good thing that we don't want to find out in the wild. API keys. API keys are kind of funny because this is where you'll have to educate your development staff that these need to remain secret, right? It's not just that, you know, oh yeah, our eBay API key got leaked, but that there's a responsibility that it's owned to. It's just like a login and password. It's no different. It needs to be kept the same way. It needs to be handled with the same amount of respect because a lot of times they just think of it as a string of letters and what biggie if it gets released, right? There was one company I was working with where they had, anyone here familiar with the Engine Yard? They're an ASP that runs Ruby instances for other people, and this company had their Engine Yard credentials released, and the attacker got the credentials, went in and shut everything down in the middle of the day. Gone. Because of something similar to this. So it's not a situation where these are just strings of letters and numbers. This has real consequence, and if we're on top of it, doing what we're doing, keeping track, making sure that this is not getting out there, and doing the other part of educating our developers that, hey, this needs to keep inside, don't be pushing out, then we can allow them to still effectively work the way they do, just not as freely and openly as they want. Credentials of any type, we really should keep out of any of our submissions. You really don't want to push to Pastebin. Included with credentials is your dot files. A lot of developers like to put their profiles up on these sites. All it takes is one pull request with someone offering to help them by spawning netcat in the background, and then you're done. I mean, this is something that we've seen happen. It's people have this idea that they want to save their profile up on a central repository, so if as they move from their work computer to their home computer to wherever, that profile moves with them. The problem is now is without paying your $10 to get that private account, you're sharing that profile with the world. And if you're not understanding what's going on, you can effectively get yourself into a lot of trouble. Any internal information leakage. This could be domain names. If you have an internal domain name that is what you're using for your internal resources, probably don't want that leaked. That's the first place people go to get a foothold. If you have internal documentation, maps, site maps, network maps. These things really shouldn't be up on these sites and shared with the world. If you wouldn't put it on a table out there in the lobby and walk away from it, probably doesn't belong up there. And then anything else you hold dear can't go. So how do we get a handle? How do we start doing our own recon? How do we start thinking this way? What tools do we need to look at? We've got a couple ways of approaching this. You have your single shot, one-off situations. These are when you're running with single reports. You're focusing in on one thing. You're trying to find something out there. This website Taz gave me a while ago is the most awesome thing I've seen. This guy went through every single pastebin, GitHub, Beanstalk, Bitbucket, all the rest of them, created a single Google search tag for it and has a form right there. So it's like one shot, one kill, you're done. Everything comes up. It's probably the funnest one to run if you're doing a one-off. Just get in dirty, get it done. Otherwise, ReconNG is an awesome tool that does this as well, along with a whole bunch of other fun OSINT stuff. But these are more for those single times when you're investigating a single instance. It's not really good to build a work plan around because you're just going to be spending all day heads down doing this. You're not going to have time to do your real work. Git Harvester is another one that specifically works with GitHub to get what you need out of it. So what do we do? How do we move this into a workflow? How do we move this into something that we can automate, aside from hiring an intern and having them just sit there searching for our own name all day? Luckily, Netflix actually solved this for us. They built this awesome tool called Scumbler. It literally is that intern. You feed it what you want to search for, and you tell it when it's going to search, and what to do with the results. And it does it, and does it very well. It takes a little bit to set up. The transforms, you have to supply your own API keys. So if you want to search Twitter, GitHub, and Google, Bing, you have to get those, supply those. But aside from that, it does the processing, goes out on a timetable, searches for the words you want to search for, or in the case of Google, if you have that automatic Google site tag, put that in there. Brings it back, it evaluates the results, and pulls out only the ones that match your criteria. This is important, where we're taking what takes a long time manually to do and shortening it down to where you have the actual intelligence you need to go now do something. So you're not having to wade through 300 pages of benign stuff to get to that one piece of information. The next thing Scumbler will do will be to decide on an action to take. What is it going to do? Is it going to open a ticket in your ticketing system? Is it going to email you? Is it going to do something with that data, pull it back, and allow you to move on with your process? It works like a cron, but way better, because it's not only just doing one shot. You can load this thing up to do multiple searches in parallel. You can have it, do them in sequential and piggyback off each other. It takes this job of covering, hey, what all of my information is out there, and pulls it back into something manageable for a workflow. And then you can settle down on, the one-offs to get your single report generation. Once you identify, hey, something's happening, go back, verify it with your tools, pull it back in, build your report, and see how you can move on from there. So, any questions? Should we ban crockpot emulation? Yes, of course. It was actually a funny part that was a product that they were thinking about making, and they scrapped it after they couldn't really do it. But it was interesting to see all the stuff in that archive. I was pouring through, and you're almost looking through somebody's diary because they have their crib notes that they had from working on it together, and little sheets that said, hey, this connects to this and this over here. The firmware build system was pretty complex, but it was all cobbled together with little shell scripts. And then you can see as the company changed hands, new people came onto the project and added their stuff to it. So it was kind of an interesting treasure trove to find and get the history behind it, but it's still kind of scary to think that someone out there could have easily hijacked their firmware. And it was all because they didn't have an internal deposit or internal repository to house all this stuff. And so the next best thing was, well, hey, this is free, let's go use it. The trade-off here is that when we're using a free service, we are the product, right? So the beauty of all these things is that anybody can search it and find whatever project they're looking for, but that also means that they can find exactly what they're looking for inside your organization. If I'm going to sit there and target your domain name and look and see, what has your domain in every file in here, pull it up, pull it back to me. Let's weed through all this stuff and pull out the actual intelligence that we need. So the comment was that he likes to put internal controls. I'm a fan of internal controls, except when was the last time that anyone who breached one of your sites followed your internal controls? Controls are awesome. They're great to write down. They're even better when someone follows them. But at the same time, criminals don't follow rules. And these things are not malicious in any sense. These are people who are making accidents. I mean, these are just... I wouldn't think that any of the ones we saw today were people who, if they knew what they were doing, would actually do it again. So it's not a matter of they're going out to break a control. They're just going to do it because they're trying to, we have a term, it's called do the needful. They're just trying to do what they need to do to get their job done. And you can't hinder that, because the minute you start getting in front of that, now you create an adverse relationship. So it's a matter of curtailing this, haphazard, just slap it up there and let it go, and kind of getting them in their head that we got to redact some stuff, pull some stuff out. These things are sensitive. You probably don't want to share them with the world. And then on our end, be resilient enough to searching out our own enterprise, figure out what's out there, and get our hands around it. Man, I thought you guys would be tougher. All right, well, that's all I got. We're shutting down early. Yeah.